The banquet manager found me by the coat room. Her name tag said Teresa. She spoke low, like she was handing me a secret. "Mr. Boyd, I was told to seat you with the catering staff tonight." She looked embarrassed for me. "But I need you to know something. The guest of honor, the man the Ashfords have been calling about all week, the one flying in late, he phoned this venue himself this morning. He asked one question. He asked where Walter Boyd would be sitting." She paused. "They treat you like the help. But that man asked about you by name. I thought you should know, before you let them put you in the back." I thanked her. I told her the back was fine. She didn't understand that. Neither did anyone else in that ballroom. But I had spent 73 years being underestimated. I knew one thing they didn't. The man they were all so desperate to impress 30 years ago, I gave him his first job. And a wrench. And a reason to keep going. My own son just didn't know it yet. Neither did the people who had seated his father next to the kitchen. Welcome back to The Forgotten Parent. Grab your coffee, get comfortable. And remember, the people in these stories had every chance to do right by the ones who raised them. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to want to stay till the end. My name is Walter Boyd. I am 73 years old. I ran Boyd's Auto on 3rd Street in McKeesport, Pennsylvania for 46 years. I fixed cars. That is the whole of it. I was good at it. I could hear a bad bearing from across a lot. I could tell you what was wrong with an engine by the smell of it. It is not a glamorous trade. But I never once handed a customer a bill they didn't earn, and I never once fixed a thing halfway. That was my name on that sign. It meant something to me. I built that shop from nothing. I want you to understand that. I started in 1978 with a rented bay and a borrowed jack. The first winter I nearly lost it. Money was thin. Marion took a second job. She cleaned offices at night. I worked days for other men and my own bay at dawn. We ate a lot of beans that year. But I never missed the rent. Not once. Slowly, cars came. Then more cars. People learned I was honest. In a mill town, honest travels fast. By 1985, the sign said Boyd's Auto, and it was paid for. It was not much. It was mine. And every cent it ever made went one place. It went into that boy. My hands tell the story better than I do. 50 years of grease works its way in. It settles into the lines of your knuckles and it does not come out. I stopped scrubbing at it a long time ago. You can wash your hands raw and never get it all. I decided to let it stay. It is the only proof left that I ever built anything with them. My wife was named Marion. We were married 44 years. She passed 6 years ago. A stroke, in her sleep, on a plain Thursday night. She went to bed and she did not wake up. I will not spend your time on that part. Some grief is not for strangers. I will only say the house has been very quiet since, and the shop was the only place the quiet couldn't follow me. We had one son. His name is Nathan. He is 31. I love him. I need you to know that before I tell you the rest. Marion and I put everything we had into that boy. Every dollar the shop ever cleared went to his school. He was sharp. Sharper than me, by a mile. He got into a good university on the strength of that brain and a stack of my invoices. I was proud enough to burst. I still am, underneath everything. That is the trouble with your own children. The pride does not switch off, even when they teach you it should. Somewhere along the way, Nathan learned to be ashamed of us. Not all at once. It crept in. In college, he stopped bringing friends home. He started correcting how I talked. He'd wince when I wore my work clothes to pick him up. I told myself it was a phase. Young men are embarrassed by their fathers. It passes. It did not pass. It grew. I remember the exact day I knew for certain, his college graduation. I drove 4 hours to be there. I wore my good shirt. I got there early. I was so proud I could barely sit still. Afterward, there were photos on the lawn. His friends, his professors, their families. I stood off to the side and waited to be called in. I waited a long time. He never called me in. Later, he said he didn't see me. But I'd been standing 20 feet away in a bright blue shirt. A father knows the difference between not being seen and not being wanted in the picture. I drove the 4 hours home that night, and I didn't tell Marion why I was quiet. She knew anyway. She always knew. Then he met Claire. Claire Ashford. And the Ashfords are not people like us. Old money, 3 generations of it, out in Fox Chapel where the houses have names. Her father, Preston Ashford, runs an investment firm. Her mother, Vivienne, runs everything else. They are the kind of people who ask what your house is worth inside of 5 minutes. Then they quietly adjust how much of their attention you're worth for the rest of the evening. I will say this plainly, because it matters later. Claire herself is a good girl. I saw it the first time I met her. She shook my greasy hand and she did not flinch. She asked about the shop, the real questions, how you learn a trade like that. She has a kindness her parents traded away for a bigger house years ago. Remember that about Claire. It matters at the end. The trouble started the moment the wedding was announced. The Ashfords were paying for all of it $150,000 at a country club with valets and a string quartet. And it became very clear, very fast, that Walter Boyd, mechanic, was a problem to be managed. Not a father to be honored. A problem. Nathan called me 2 weeks before. He used a careful voice, the one you use on a difficult customer. "Dad, I need to talk to you about the wedding." I said I was looking forward to it. There was a pause. "The Ashfords run in certain circles," he said. "There's going to be a lot of important people there. Preston's biggest client is even flying in." Another pause. I need you to keep things low-key. Maybe don't mention the shop. If people ask, you're retired. In business." I sat with the phone a moment. "Nathan," I said, "I am the shop. That's what I retired from." He didn't laugh. "Just tonight, Dad," he said. "For me." "Please?" So I said all right. I have said all right to that boy his whole life. It got worse when I arrived. There was no seat for me at the family table. I walked in the one good suit Marion bought me. I looked at the place cards. My name was not among the Boyds or the Ashfords. Teresa, the banquet manager, found me a chair at a small round table near the service doors. I sat with the photographer's assistant and 2 cousins nobody else wanted near them. The kitchen doors swung open and shut behind me all night. I could feel the heat off the pass. That was where my son had put me. Near the kitchen where the food came out. Claire tried to fix it. I want that on the record. Early in the evening, she saw where they'd put me. Her face fell. She crossed the whole room and crouched by my chair. "Mr. Boyd, this is wrong," she whispered. "You're the father of the groom. You belong at the family table." She took my arm to move me. And her mother appeared, out of nowhere, the way Vivienne did. "Claire, darling, the seating is settled," she said, smiling for the room. "Don't make a scene on your own wedding day." She said it sweet. Underneath it was steel. Claire looked at me, helpless. I patted her hand. "Go be a bride," I told her. "Don't spend 1 minute of your day on this." She went, because I asked her to. But she kept looking back. A good heart in a cold family is a lonely thing. I knew that look. Marion used to wear it at Ashford-sized rooms too. Vivienne Ashford came by once, early, holding a glass of champagne. She looked me over the way you look over a car you're not going to buy. "You must be Nathan's people," she said, "not father." People, such a lovely trade, working with your hands. So honest. She said honest the way other people say quaint. Then she drifted off to someone who mattered more. "I have been talked down to by experts," She was good at it, I'll give her that. The worst of it came during the introductions. Nathan brought Claire around to the important guests, table by table. When they reached mine, one of Preston's colleagues asked pleasantly, "And who's this?" And my son, my own son, at his own wedding put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Oh, this is Walter." An old family friend. An old family friend. He introduced his father as an old family friend. Then he moved on to the next table before anyone could ask a second question. Claire's face went white. She looked back at me. I gave her the smallest shake of my head. "Not here, not on your day." She let herself be led away. But I saw what it cost her. I want to tell you what that felt like, and I want to be honest, because I promised you the true story. It was not anger. Anger is loud, and anger is easy. This was quieter than that, and much heavier. It was the particular cold of realizing your own child is ashamed of the hands that raised him, ashamed of the grease that paid for the education that got him into a room where he could be ashamed of you. I sat by that swinging kitchen door and I felt 73 years old for the first time in my life. If you've made it this far, do me one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of folks watch every minute of these and never do. And it costs you nothing, and it means everything to a channel like this one. Thank you, genuinely. Now let me tell you about the boy who tried to rob my shop. It was the winter of 1994. A cold one. I was closing up late, alone, when I heard the back window go. A kid came through it, 17 maybe, all bones and bad coat. He had a wrench in his hand. One of mine, off the bench. He was trying to get it into his pocket and out the window before I came around the corner. He froze when he saw me. I have never in my life seen a person look so caught and so tired of being caught. He didn't run. He just stood there, waiting for me to be one more adult who'd hurt him. I did not call the police. I don't fully know why. Marion would tell you she knows. She'd come down to the shop that night with my supper, the way she did when I worked late. She took one look at that shaking kid holding a stolen wrench and she said, "Walter, feed him first. Then decide." So we did. We sat that boy down in the office and Marion gave him her own dinner and we let him get warm. His name was Elias. He'd aged out of foster care 6 months before. He'd been sleeping in a stripped car 2 blocks over. He wasn't a thief. He was a starving kid who'd run out of other ideas. I gave him a job, sweeping at first, then handing me tools. Then I saw how his mind worked. It worked like a machine. That boy could see how things fit together. So I started teaching him the trade. He slept on a cot in the back for a while until I co-signed a room for him over on 5th. He was the best natural mechanic I ever trained. But he was better than the trade. He had something bigger in him. After 2 years, he came to me and said he wanted to build things, not just fix them. I told him to go do it. On his last day, I took the wrench off the bench, the same one he'd tried to steal, and I put it in his hand. "So you remember where you started," I said. "And so you remember somebody thought you were worth more than a police report. I want to tell you the truth about the years after." He wrote at first. Then life got big and busy for him, the way it does. The letters slowed. I did not mind. You don't do a thing like that for a boy expecting a return. Marion and I would see his name now and then in the business pages. Elias Brandt. He'd built a company, then a bigger one. Then he was the kind of name that flies into a wedding late on a private plane, the kind that makes a whole ballroom of rich people hold their breath. I never called him. It wasn't my place to go collecting on a kindness. I just quietly hoped from a garage in McKeesport that the world had been good to my boy Elias. That was all I wanted from it. What I did not know, what I only learned that night, from Teresa, the banquet manager, was that Elias Brandt was Preston Ashford's whitest whale. Preston's firm had been chasing a contract with Elias's company for 2 years. $60 million, that contract. Preston had begged through 3 intermediaries for Elias to attend this wedding. He wanted to shake his hand in a friendly setting and finally close it. And Elias had said yes. The Ashfords thought they had landed the deal of a lifetime. They had no idea why Elias Brandt had actually agreed to come. They had no idea that when the invitation crossed his desk, the only name on it he cared about was the groom's father, Walter Boyd. So I sat by the kitchen, in Marion's good suit, and I made a decision. I could have stopped my own humiliation at any moment. I could have leaned over to Vivienne Ashford and said 4 words, "Elias Brandt is mine." I could have watched her face change. But I didn't, and I want to tell you why, because it's the only part of this I'm truly proud of. I wanted to see who these people were when they thought I was nobody. You learn everything about a person by how they treat the man they think can do nothing for them. I let them show me. I let my son show me. I sat quietly. I let every one of them tell the truth about themselves. They still believed no one important was watching. There was a moment I nearly left. I'll be honest about it. Around 9, before the toasts, I stood up from that little table by the kitchen and I thought about just going home. Slipping out. Driving back to McKeesport and the quiet house and never saying a word. It would have been easy. It would have spared everyone, including me. I got as far as the coat room. Teresa was there. She saw my face. She didn't say anything. She just handed me my coat, and then she said one thing. "My father worked with his hands too," she said. "If he were here tonight and somebody sat him by my kitchen, I'd want him to stay long enough to be seen." I stood there holding my coat, and I thought about Marion saying, "Feed him first, then decide." I thought about all the people who never got to be seen. And I put the coat back on the hook. I went back to my little table. I decided to stay long enough to be seen. I didn't have to wait long. At 9:30, the room changed. You could feel it, like weather. The doors opened, and a man came in, and the whole ballroom seemed to lean toward him. Silver at the temples now, an expensive coat, but I'd have known that face in the dark. Elias, Preston Ashford practically ran to him, hand already out, Vivienne 2 steps behind with her best smile. "Mr. Brandt, we are so honored, please. Your table is right up front." Next to Elias shook Preston's hand. Polite. Brief. And then he looked past him. He looked past all of them, scanning the room, the way a man looks for the one face he came to find. And his eyes stopped on a small table by the kitchen doors. He didn't say anything to Preston. He just walked. Straight down the length of that ballroom, past the head table, past the important people half standing to greet him, past Vivienne's outstretched hand. The whole room turned to watch where the great Elias Brandt was going. He was going to the service doors. He stopped in front of my little table. This man, this billionaire they'd all been holding their breath for. He looked down at a grease-handed mechanic in a 6-year-old suit, and his voice broke right in half. "Mr. Boyd," he said. And then he couldn't say anything else. He just pulled me up out of that chair, and he held on to me like a drowning man. In front of all of them. The room was dead silent. Preston Ashford's face was doing something I'll remember for the rest of my life. Confusion. Then dread. Then the slow arithmetic of a man realizing he has made a catastrophic mistake and does not yet know how big. Vivienne's champagne glass was frozen halfway to her mouth, and Nathan, my Nathan, was staring at the two of us with his whole world tilting. Elias finally let go. He kept one hand on my shoulder like he was afraid I'd vanish. He turned around, and he looked at that whole silent, glittering room, and he did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I need to introduce someone," he said, "because I think there's been a mistake about who he is." He looked at Preston when he said it. 30 years ago, I was a 17-year-old kid who'd been thrown away by everybody. I broke into this man's shop to steal a wrench so I could sell it for food. He caught me. Elias's voice was steady now. He didn't call the police, he fed me. His wife gave me her own supper. He gave me a job. He gave me a trade. He co-signed the first door I ever had a key to. He held up his other hand. And in it, I hadn't even seen him take it out, was a worn brass wrench. My wrench. He had carried it into that ballroom. He gave me this the day I left, so I'd remember somebody thought I was worth more than a police report. I have carried it into every deal I have ever made. Everything I have built. Everything. Every dollar in this room that any of you are so proud of it exists. Because Walter Boyd decided a starving kid was worth saving. He looked around slowly. So before anyone here wonders who the old man by the kitchen is, he is the most important person in this building. And I came a very long way tonight to sit at his table. Not the head one, his. I have been in quiet rooms in my life. I have never heard a quiet like the one that followed. Then the room changed its mind about me. All at once, it was something to see. The same people who'd looked through me for 3 hours suddenly found me fascinating. A man appeared at my elbow with a drink I hadn't asked for. A woman told me she'd always admired the trades. Someone wanted my card. Someone else asked if I consulted. 3 hours ago, I was next to the kitchen. Now I was the most interesting man alive. Funny how that works. Funny how fast a person becomes worth knowing. I was polite. I have always been polite. But I did not warm up to a single one of them. I'd learned everything I needed to know already. You learn it in the first 3 hours, not the last 3 minutes. A man who's kind to you only after he learns your worth was never kind. He was just calculating. I've fixed enough cars to know the difference between a good engine and one that only sounds good when you're watching. There was one group I did warm to. The catering staff. All night, they'd been the only people in that room who treated me like a person. A young man kept my water full. A woman slipped me a warm roll before the meal, quietly, like a secret. They were my people. Grease or gravy, it's the same hands. When the room turned, I saw a few of them by the kitchen doors, watching. One of them, the young man, gave me a small nod. He was grinning. He'd watched the whole thing. He'd watched one of us walk in and turn out to matter more than all of them. I lifted my glass to him, just an inch. He lifted a water pitcher back. That toast meant more to me than anything Preston Ashford ever said. Teresa found me too. Later, she didn't say anything smug. She just squeezed my arm once. "I'm glad you stayed," she said. So was I. I nearly hadn't. A coat rack and a kind stranger were all that stood between me and driving home to an empty house, never seen. I think about that. How close a person comes to missing his own moment. How often the good ones just quietly leave. I'll tell you how it ended, because I promised you the truth. And the truth does not end with an old man being carried out on shoulders. It ended quieter than that. And better. Preston Ashford came to me. Of course he did. The $60 million man had just crossed his ballroom for a mechanic, and Preston's whole future had rearranged itself in 90 seconds. He was gray. He started in about a terrible misunderstanding, about how he'd had no idea, about how of course I must join the family table. I let him talk. Then I said the only thing I said to him all night. "Miss Ashford, you knew exactly who I was. You just didn't know who I knew. Those aren't the same thing, and a better man would understand the difference. He didn't have an answer. Elias, standing beside me, made it clear without a single threat that how the Ashfords treated Walter Boyd from this night forward was very much connected to whether there would ever be a contract. There wasn't cruelty in it, just a fact, laid on the table like a wrench. Preston understood facts. It was the only language he'd ever really spoken. Vivienne tried to hug me. I stepped back, gently, and I let her hug the air. Not to be cruel, only because a hug you have to earn is not a thing you can grab. She had called me these people 3 hours earlier. I was not going to pretend 3 hours had rewritten 40 years of how she saw the world. Some people you forgive, you just don't hand them your back. Claire, my Claire, the good one, pushed through all of it and threw her arms around me, and she was crying. And she kept saying she was sorry, over and over, sorry for her family, sorry she hadn't stopped them. I held my new daughter-in-law and I told her the truth. Sweetheart, I said, you were the one person in that whole room who shook my hand when you thought I was nobody. Do you know what that makes you? It makes you the richest person in this family, and it has nothing to do with your father's money. She has been mine ever since. Some family you're born to. Some walks across a ballroom and chooses you. My son was the hardest part. Nathan found me near the end of the night, out on the terrace, away from all of it. He couldn't get a word out, so I said it for him. You introduced me as a family friend, I said. At your own wedding. To your own father. He started to cry, I let him. Then I said the rest. You were ashamed of these hands. But these hands paid for the school that put you in this room. There is grease in these knuckles that will never come out, and every bit of it went into you. I let that sit. You are still my son. Your mother would never forgive me if I threw you away over the worst night of your character. But you are going to spend a long time learning not to be ashamed of where you came from. And it starts by never again introducing your father as anything but your father. He nodded. He couldn't speak. That was all right. We had time. Grease takes years to work in. It takes years to work back out, too. Elias drove me home himself. In a car worth more than my house, down the parkway to McKeesport, the two of us not saying much, the way men who understand each other don't have to. He came into the shop, which I still keep, though I only work on the cars I feel like now. He looked at the old bench where he'd once tried to steal a wrench. He ran his hand along it. I named my company after this place, you know, he said. I didn't know. 3rd Street Holdings, he said. Nobody ever asks why. He looked at me. It's because of the address of the first place anybody was ever kind to me. We stood in that garage a long while, an old mechanic and the boy he fed one cold night, and the world felt, for a moment, like it had come out even. The contract closed, by the way. Preston got his $60 million. But not the way he'd planned. Elias signed it in my shop office, not Preston's boardroom. He said he wanted the ink to dry on 3rd Street. Preston had to drive out to McKeesport to get his own deal done. He sat in my waiting room with the old vinyl chairs. He drank the burnt coffee from my machine. I did not gloat. I just let the room do the talking. A man learns a lot about himself waiting on a mechanic's bench for the deal of his life. I hope he learns something. I truly do. Elias and I have supper now, once a month. He flies in. He sits in Marion's kitchen and eats like the starving kid he used to be. And he tells me about the things he's building. He kept the wrench. It sits on his desk, he says, in an office 40 floors up, where men in good suits ask about it and he tells them the truth. I like knowing that. A little piece of Marion's kindness, up that high, still doing its work. They put me at the back of my own son's wedding, by the kitchen doors, because a man with grease in his hands couldn't possibly matter in a room like that. And here is the only thing I'd want you to carry out of this, if you carry anything at all. The world will tell you that the people worth knowing are the ones at the head table. It has it exactly backwards. Watch how a person treats the man they think can do nothing for them. That is the whole measure of them. Everything else is just seating. Marion would tell me I'm being dramatic. She'd be right. Then she'd hand me my supper and tell me to feed somebody before I decide anything. So that's what I try to do. Still, there's a kid sweeping up at the shop these days. 17, bad coat. Aged out of the system. I didn't ask many questions. I just put a broom in his hands and I started teaching him what a bad bearing sounds like. You never know which starving kid is going to walk across a ballroom for you one day. That was never the point. The point was the supper. It was always the supper. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being part of this family.